Why are they doing this? They're afraid. I think Democratic senators are afraid of the left wing of their party, that if they don't give some credibility to this trial that started in the House, they're in trouble. And Joe Biden's been a huge disappointment thus far, not only on policy, but on the idea that I'm going to bring the country together. How easy would it be, Sean, for Joe Biden to say it is bad to impeach a president after they leave office? Enough already with Donald Trump. Let's look forward.
You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Emily Campagno, Fox News contributor and Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren, host of Laura Logan Has No Agenda on Fox Nation, Laura Logan. And joining us on the virtual couch in the center seat, country music star and host of The Pursuit on Fox Nation, John Rich. Good to see everybody. All right. Let's get John's take on what's happening with impeachment on Capitol Hill, and maybe just a little thought on what Senator Graham just said, too.
Well, I think he's spot on. You know, Senator Graham said, I think they're afraid of their hard left flank of what they're going to say. I think they're afraid of something bigger than that, and that is if they can't stick an actual indictment of impeachment on this president or on our former president, that he might run again for president, and they don't want that. And so I think it plays a little deeper than that. But the calls of unity that we hear, you know, my Granny Rich would always say, you know, don't always just listen to what they say. Watch what they do. That's where you really know. And, you know, wise old lady Granny Rich was. And it's almost like it on Christmas Eve, if I told my kids, I said, all right, boys, you know, they're 9 and 11. If I said, guys, we're going to have a really great, beautiful, peaceful Christmas tomorrow, but tonight we're going to have a fist fight right here in the living room. I mean, they don't go together. It's forked tongue, it's duplicitous, and none of us believe it's actually authentic. And I think to the point of President Biden, if he wanted to say, listen, enough is enough, let's move on, that would actually go a long way, and we would believe him more when he called for unity.
Well, you know, John, it also goes along with what President Biden had promised he would do. And Laura, that was to focus in on COVID-19. Look, we've been monitoring for the last hour on the Faulkner Focus exactly the first news conference that the COVID team under Biden is holding. And we're hearing things like, yeah, million shots. We need 500 million, which is a lot more than a million a day. They got to focus in on that.
Well, and there's a lot of similarities between their program and the previous administration's program. So they're going to face some criticism for that as well. But what is not being addressed here is so many things that have happened because of the pandemic and because of COVID. You have, for example, Dallas ISD. That's one city in this country that reported 100,000 children had just literally dropped out the day they went to online school. How many ISDs is that happening in all over this country? There are other diseases like heart disease and cancer, dementia, mental illness, suicide. There's so many things that are happening at such a staggering rate because of the pandemic, not to mention the effects of poverty and the complete obliteration of so many small businesses in this country. And none of that is being addressed either. And these are very, very significant issues for millions of people in this country.
Tomi, your take on it.
Well, again, I think everyone's been correct thus far, but I do think not only are the Democrats obsessed with Donald Trump and still obsessed with Donald Trump, they want to make sure they send a clear message to anybody who dare utter the words voter fraud or anything about election integrity to sit down, shut up, and comply. This is also because they're terrified that he's going to run in 2024. They think that by the fact that he wasn't reelected and the fact that they have kicked him off Twitter and Instagram and all of the big tech platforms, they think that suddenly he's just going to go away and his supporters are going to go away. But if they're really honest with themselves, with that little kernel of truth that lives somewhere within their dark hearts, they know that his supporters haven't gone anywhere. We are more fired up than ever. We are going to hold the Biden administration accountable. And that's the other half of this thing. President Biden is now signing a record number of executive orders, a lot of which he said he would never do. It is the socialist far-left agenda that he promised he wouldn't enact. He was supposed to be a moderate, unifying the American people, a president for all. No, they're distracting us with this impeachment trial where he goes and signs all these executive orders. It's a watch this hand while President Biden uses his pen with this hand. It's a distraction, it's an obsession, and it's the priorities of the Democrats. And unfortunately, it's something we're going to have to put up with for 2 and 4 years. But we're going to need to make sure we hold them accountable and point out every time that they do it, because it's never going to stop if we don't.
Well, Emily, we are getting some access to the president and to his communications team. They are giving daily briefings, and taking some questions, so on and so forth. But some of the bigger questions that have been asked are tough for them to answer. In fact, we saw a correction between the president saying that, oh, yeah, this will be, something that we can really sink our teeth into and really turn things around, I'm paraphrasing him, by spring. And Jen Psaki, press secretary, said, no. You're talking about getting the majority of Americans who need this, adults, need this vaccination. We're looking at summer. I mean, she said, and she started her sentence with, the fact is, correcting the president.
That's right. And that mixed messaging sort of flies in the face of this administration that came out of the gate saying the one thing you can count on with this Biden administration is constancy of messaging. And I think that also underscores the fact that, to echo my colleagues' points here, that the average American would be surprised with pursuing impeachment when there are clearly bigger fish to fry that would have an actual effect on us. And I'd like to make the point that even if you are looking through the lens of this impeachment, that it is constitutional, that the argument of futility, it still applies. What purpose does it serve the average American if they do accept as true that this is indeed the remedy reserved to Congress for an impeachable offense committed by the president at the latter days of office, that this is a power reserved to them because it's not specifically delineated in the Constitution, that Belknap is in fact precedence, that it's sound? If you accept all of those arguments, even still, you have to accept then that it's futile because it's a numbers game. And again, then, what purpose does it serve?
Yes.
I argue that it backfires, right? We have Representative Maxine Waters that came out and said, quote, we must take away his power about President Trump, former President Trump, to run in the future. Well, to me, that's taking away the power of the voters, the power to electorally convict and forgive. And we have additional remedies. We have alternative ones like censuring that would get the point across, but wouldn't take away the powers of the average American for whom these people are supposed to be our representatives.
Yeah, you mentioned censoring, and I want to get this in before we go to the commercial break. It's a follow-up with you, Emily. Karl Rove told me last hour that, yeah, you could censor, and so that shows that the president did something that was out of the realm that he was supposed to do as a leader of the country. But he's already been impeached twice in the House. So when you hear Congresswoman and others, Congresswoman Waters, speak up on this issue, what are they hoping to do? They're not senators. And when 45 out of 50 say that they think it's unconstitutional, they jump on the bandwagon with Senator Rand Paul with that. What do those numbers say to you about the future, Emily?
I think it indicates the fact that there is a priority of these other issues that are more pressing to the American people. Again, to echo what my colleagues have said, that regardless how many GOP senators see that this is a constitutional process, they further see, or more pressingly see, that there are other needs that would be served by their time legislatively. And I also think that speaks to a collaboration that frankly is lacking on the Hill, that a censure might take place to illustrate, look, we condemn this behavior. It's impeachable. It's not necessarily a crime, but it's part of that political process, and that's afforded within our power to do so. But we recognize that this numbers game is futile, and therefore we will focus our legislative energies elsewhere. We know how they feel. It's been made clear. So perhaps the ability and the power of the American people to speak whether we see him as fit to hold a second office should be reserved to those at the time, and save this time better spent for those on the Hill that are having their salaries paid by us.
All right, we'll move on. Tulsi Gabbard going after top Democrats and big tech censorship in her own party, why the Congresswoman says they are the largest threat to American freedom.
Those like John Brennan, Adam Schiff, and others are also acting as domestic terrorists because they are also undermining our Constitution by trying to take away our civil liberties and rights that are guaranteed to us.
Plus, President Biden has issued a slew of executive orders. We've been talking about this. The kind of thing he used to criticize when he was a presidential candidate. Is this any way to govern? That's what some are asking. Is it going to be pen, or is it going to be bipartisan legislation?
Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol.
Welcome back. Former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard there saying leaders like former CIA Director John Brennan, Congressman Adam Schiff, and big tech executives are bigger domestic threats than the crowd that stormed the Capitol for picking and choosing what people can say. Gabbard doubling down on her comments on Tucker's show last night.
Those like John Brennan, Adam Schiff, and others are also acting as domestic terrorists because they are also undermining our Constitution by trying to take away our civil liberties and rights that are guaranteed to us.
Lara, I'd like to start with you. I know you have such strong thoughts about this, as well as with your boots on the ground journalistic experience. How do you feel about this?
Well, you know, there's a very simple example that you can use to highlight what the hypocrisy that's really going on here, which is Russia collusion, for example. You know, John Brennan, Adam Schiff, the people who are mentioned here, these are people who accused the President of the United States of being a Russian spy, of being a traitor, and of working for Vladimir Putin. And they didn't just accuse him, they outright said it. In fact, they backed it up and said there's evidence of this, that they've seen evidence of it, that the intelligence agencies have confirmed it, etc., etc. That is the absolute definition of sedition. That is actually trying to overthrow and undermine an elected government of the people. And nobody talked about domestic terrorism at that time. You look at an entire, how many months of burning cities in this country, burning businesses to the ground, destroying people's lives, killing people. Has everybody forgotten about, you know, the off-duty police officer who was African-American, by the way, who was murdered during one of the riots? There were many more than that. So when you look at this, Tulsi Gabbard, good on her, you know, for having the courage to speak up at a time when very few people are actually speaking up, where the Republicans, you know, on these issues have become, for the most part, indistinguishable from their colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And to me, what is most significant about this, what I hear from people all the time, every day, is what this really means in terms of anyone who supports or supported Donald Trump, and anyone who believes in the things that he believed in or that he represented. This movement was never about one man. It was about millions of Americans who said, we are the people. When you say we the people, we are the people, and we're exercising our right. And now you're going to condemn us as domestic terrorists. And that is a very dangerous thing, because there's legislation before Congress now. And this is about legalizing the surveillance of American citizens, about silencing and intimidating. And that is not consistent with freedom or the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment. And you can go on and on and on. These are God-given rights, not government-given rights, not man-given rights. These are God-given human rights.
Tommy, to Lara's points, so does that make us now a country, instead of free speech, one of censorship? And if so, tell us about the danger that poses.
Well, yeah, we're in a country right now where one voice is the acceptable voice. It's the valiant voice. It's the courageous voice. It's the moral voice. And that is the voice of the left, because the left has decided that that's the only voice that they want to hear. But again, when we talk about what happened with the Capitol riot, or we talk about what happened all summer long with the BLM and Antifa riots, when we talk about people with misleading information or misinformation on tech platforms, which is all the things that these tech giants are trying to use to silence and censor Trump supporters and conservatives, I'm one of those people that says, hey, if there's speech you don't like, including speech that I don't like from the left, the remedy for that is more speech. Let's have more dialogue. Let's allow people the ability to decipher what they believe and what they don't, what they find to be an incitement, what they find is not. Let's trust the American people to be adult enough and responsible enough to be able to be exposed to speech and be okay with it. No more free speech zones on colleges. No more big tech censoring not only a sitting president, but the pillow guy. I mean, this is a threat to all of our rights. They're going to go after the First Amendment first, and then after that, all of our other rights are open game because they've silenced us, they've censored us, they've taken us out of the conversation, and then everything for them becomes so much easier after that. Let's think about it. Not only do they have the White House, they've got the entirety of Congress, they've got big tech, they've got Hollywood, they've got academia. What do we have left? Well, pretty soon, not a whole lot.
So, John, to Tommy's point, will it get worse before it gets better?
Probably so, but I just want to say, way to go, Tulsi Gabbard. Come on now, I love that. It showed courage, it showed conviction. She obviously knows she's going to get a lot of heat coming back at her for saying something like that. But I was really encouraged to hear her, a Democrat, step out and say something as truthful as that. And honestly, the Republicans that I've watched over the past 6 months that say certain things or try to stay out of the hot water, or when the kitchen gets too hot, they go running out with their hair on fire. We're sick of that, to be honest with you. Americans are sick of it, whether you're Republican or Democrat. And I say, way to go, Tulsi. You know, that actually gives me hope for something I've been hoping for to see happen in this country, which is a new spirit of truth and of conviction and of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, regardless of your political affiliation, that people like Tulsi Gabbard and people like myself can find things to agree on that are a bigger subject than some of the things they try to splinter us off into our corners. And I hope we do see a coming together of like-minded people, regardless if they're Democrats or Republicans. She really made a statement right there that hit me in a really strong way, and I applaud her for that.
So, Harris, using Tulsi Gabbard as an example, will any other outlets report or amplify on what she has said here?
Well, you know, it depends on how much support she gets, I suppose. She'll continue to be as vocal as she always has been, as we always have known her to be. I just want to say, Granny Rich would have been so proud of you right then, John Rich, because you're looking for that, what I call the juicy middle, where we come together on the things that really, really matter most. Because we can. You never know where the great ideas are going to be coming from. You've got to have every voice at the table.
That's correct.
Amen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. President Biden signing a record number of executive orders and executive actions in what's become a long pattern of presidents implementing or repealing entire agendas with the stroke of a pen. Is this how the U.S. is going to be governed now? Plus, President Biden's chief of staff now backing the Chicago Teachers Union's objection to reopening schools, as critics say they're contradicting the CDC's own guidance. What happened to decisions based on science? Reaction from Outnumbered ahead.
Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
Darn the videotape. Just won't go away. That was then candidate Joe Biden last October, blasting the need for executive orders. But the now president, Joe Biden, has signed a record 38 executive orders and executive actions so far, with more expected to come today. Remember, it's only been a week. 22 of them being executive orders dwarfing the number of orders issued by former presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump in the initial days of their tenures. And of course, many Democrats accuse Trump of being a dictator, as Biden also suggested in that video. John Rich, your take.
That's a lot of paper, Harris. That is a lot of paper moving through there in 7 days. And I watched a couple of videos of him signing, and he's looking like, which one is this, which one is that? I was wondering to myself, I wonder if he's asking, is this the new lease on my Suburban? Is this the pardon for Hunter? Is this an actual executive order? Like, what am I signing right now? I don't even know how you can keep that much stuff straight. It makes you wonder, back to when he was running, a lot of people said, you know, they're going to hand him a piece of paper and he's going to sign it. Like, whoever's writing these orders and wants their initiatives to come to bear are going to write these things up, and Biden's just going to stamp it, and here we go. 7 days in, I think you said 38 pieces of paper now moving and more coming today. Nah, I don't buy it. I don't expect a new president to come in and not sign executive orders, but that is pretty over the top.
Well, and that's part of the promise, right, John? I mean, you're going to turn some things around that weren't exactly permanent. We saw that on immigration and DACA, and presidents will do that sort of thing. But this, Emily, if you really look at what these actions and executive orders do, aren't some of them just temporary? I don't know if it's completely to turn things around as permanently as this president would hope.
Exactly, and especially, actions are sort of largely symbolic, and of course we see orders going through the courts. We see the challenges navigating their way through the courts almost immediately. And to me, fundamentally, this actually goes back to our conversation in the beginning of the show about surrendering powers, and that fundamentally this is supposed to be a country where the people govern, where the people choose representatives to represent them legislatively. And that instead it's become a pattern where every president now, with a stroke of a pen, undoes the prior administration's agenda and either, as you pointed out in the intro, repeals or sets this agenda that then, as we whipsaw back and forth, there's no collaboration in the legislature, there's no conversation, there's no debate, there's no then meeting in the middle to that juicy spot you mentioned earlier. Instead, this is just a whipsaw back and forth by the American people. And I also see foreign leaders as well watching and simply waiting, because they know that if they don't agree, they just have 3 years to wait, or at the most 7. And if they do like it, they're like, great, we're going to squeeze a bunch in.
You know, Laura, this has already gotten the ire up of some Republicans. And as Emily is alluding to, you had hoped that there would be some sort of a honeymoon period for the practice of bipartisanship or nonpartisanship. But why do you think Republicans are so angry right now? I mean, you see senators who are saying, oh my gosh, this is far left leaning, this is radical, and they have lots of words for it. And there are 38 pieces of paper, as John pointed out.
Well, of course, I'm sitting in the great state of Texas, right, as Texans like to say. And here the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, was one of the first to challenge in court one of Biden's executive orders putting a halt to deportations, right? No deportations for 100 days. And while people say, well, this is, more temporary, it's not as permanent as perhaps Biden would like, it doesn't change the fact that it has a very profound and dramatic impact, right? Because what you're looking at with the border, when you pause deportations for 100 days, for example, and you shift to a mission that's about migrant care and no longer about border security, when you are instructing Border Patrol, the orders are coming down, warning orders to prepare to stop security patrols, to surge your agents to the border, literally just to process people. When they're planning on so many people coming in that they're not even going to go through the normal process, right? Where they need extra resources just to treat them and get them all pushed through. That tells you that there's real intent behind these executive orders.
Laura, I didn't mean to cut in, but we've got the Press Secretary, Jen Psaki, who's going to introduce the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, John Kerry.